everyone, and welcome to another episode of Blindside Fresno. I'm Darcy Elliott. I will be your host today, and I am joined by Jamie Gibson Barrows. She is a local advocate in our community. Welcome, Jamie. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
We're just going to jump right in, I guess,
Okay.
and find out a little bit about you and your story and what brings you here today. So I guess we'll start by sharing that you have retinitis pigmentosa.
Correct.
So why don't you tell the audience what that is and when you found out about it and that kind of thing.
Great. Well, retinitis pigmentosa, I was diagnosed at the age of 30. And I went in just for a regular routine because I was having difficulty with driving at night. And the ophthalmologist that I saw at the time said that everything looked really good except for your retinitis pigmentosa. And I was like, what is that?
Oh, yeah.
And he was quite surprised that I didn't know. So that's the first I ever heard of it, and that it was also genetic, which also surprised me because nobody in my family has that kind of vision loss.
Really?
So I contacted my family, my immediate family, brothers, sisters, mom, grandmother, and they all went out and got tested for this retinitis pigmentosa and found out that I also have a brother who has retinitis pigmentosa, or we call it RP, is the short name for it.
I can see why. That's quite a name.
Yeah,
right?
because you can see with...
So we'll be saying RP probably from now on, just to keep it simple. But
Okay.
Okay.
So 2 out of 6 of us have this genetic disease of the retina called RP. Nobody, to our knowledge, is ever had it before. And being diagnosed in it later in life was pretty unusual at that time as well.
So looking back, how did RP begin to manifest itself for you? I mean, you didn't realize you had it at the time, but looking back, what were some of the things that you can say, oh, I get it now?
Right. Well, the first thing is night vision.
Okay.
I've always had difficulties with low lights and being in the dark. And then the other thing is education-wise, there were times that I just didn't do as well as other students, and it wasn't because of my intellectual side, it was because I just couldn't see it. You know, I would miss a lot.
But at the time, did you feel like you were not as smart, or you?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I'm a teacher, so in
Yes.
full disclosure, I find that particularly of interest that that would affect you in that way, because that's not something that's immediately obvious. If you can see in the daytime, schools in the daytime, why would that be a challenge for you?
Well, the challenge being with the low light, let's say that you're in class and they turn the lights down low because you're seeing something that's supposed to be on the board.
Oh, okay.
Overcast days.
Oh.
You know, you don't have as much light illuminating in through the windows.
Interesting.
And so anything that would take a little bit of light source away from me during the day would be almost just as difficult as the evening. But at the same time, I thought that was normal because I didn't know. We weren't educated on the disease.
Right.
Nor diagnosed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even though it wouldn't have been great to know ahead of time, maybe it actually could have saved you some difficulties in life if you had known, oh, this is my RP. This has nothing to do with my mental abilities.
Right. And saved a few stitches.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would be important too.
Yeah.
So what other, besides the night vision, what was the next thing that kind of was noticeable to you?
Then the next stage is the peripheral.
Okay.
So what happens is it goes into what they call a tunnel vision.
Okay.
So what you do see centrally gets smaller and smaller.
Okay.
So it's eventually the peripheral slowly closes and closes until it hits your central vision.
And I believe as we were talking before, you said now you've lost central vision in your left eye?
Left eye?
And so you have some in your right eye.
Correct.
And there's no way of knowing how long that will remain, if it will remain.
Right.
But based on the progression so far, you expect to lose that at some point.
Correct, because it is in my left eye.
Okay.
And then once it gets into the central, in my experience, the first thing that I noticed was colors. Colors started fading. They weren't as bright as they used to be. I can still see color today, but there's certain colors I have very difficult time with.
Okay.
You
So
know,
is like sharp contrasting things helpful to you, like white letters on a black background? Or
absolutely.
Is that, to
Yes.
some people I know that is a benefit.
Contrast for me is very important. Brightness is very important.
Okay.
Even in my own home, I do contrast with, whenever I purchase something, you know, I look for some things that are contrast. Either if it's going to
Okay.
be sitting up against the back wall in the kitchen, my light switches, they're contrast to the wall, you know, so
Okay.
there's different colors.
So it's interesting. We've talked to several people with blindness issues, low vision, right? And some people are like, "Oh, it's always dark in our house because I don't need light, so we just turn the lights out."
Right.
But is it pretty bright in your house because lights help you?
That it is. I recently remodeled, and I had a lot of dark paneling in my home,
Okay.
and those are all, as of today, they're all painted white.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then you have whatever you put on the wall is probably a darker, so it.
Slightly darker to give me the contrast.
Okay.
The rims of the door is a little darker.
So
I
that's
can find it.
interesting because we were talking about the general public doesn't get the full spectrum of what it means to be blind or low vision. Some people have zero vision, no
Right.
light or perception at all, and then some people have, there's a whole spectrum of what is helpful and what you can see in bright lights and not low lights, and some people are the opposite, or color, no color, shadows, no shadows. It's
Yes.
it's a very almost individualized.
Yep.
So you have
that
to
is true.
learn. So you're sitting in the doctor's office,
Mm-hmm.
and you have RP, and you're going to go blind.
Right.
What do you do with that information? How do you go on the next day or the day after that, or,
Yeah. Once you get through the shock.
yeah.
I actually recently, in the last, I think it was about 2 years ago, I wrote a poem kind of that addresses that. Would you like
Okay.
me to read that for you?
I would love for you to read that. And
Great.
conveniently, we have it right here. And Jamie has agreed to read it for us, and she will be using her magnifier. So this is one of her accommodations. That's all right.
Okay, the poem that I wrote is, let's see, I called it The Beginning to an End.
Okay.
It began as a routine visit. I am familiar with the large black chair I used to climb up on as a child. Now as an adult, I sit comfortably relaxed in the familiar environment. Quickly, I changed from relaxed to a racing heart rate, sweat forming over my brow, confusion and disbelief. As I sit in the familiar chair, spoken words ringing into my ears, "You're going blind. It's rare and no cure." As terror overwhelmed my body, the room became unfamiliar as I tried to focus on what I just heard. And I hear, "Do you have anyone to drive you home?" I just shake my head no. "You're going blind?" As my mind flashes of no more driving, seeing beautiful scenery, the faces of loved ones, friends disappeared, life changed as I once knew it, with 3 words spoken to me by a stranger. Life changes began 1 pixel at a time. Every pixel disappears into a tunnel of darkness as time passes. No matter how much no matter how much you concentrate, strain, or wished, that pixel of sight is no more. I cry for the loss. Years have disappeared as quickly taking the pixels of light and color with it. Time heals all wounds. I wish for my time to stand still. As time passes, I see less and less, unknowing if my time will ever stand still in sight. When will the window of sight have an end? No one can know. Cry till you no longer breathe, scream until you have no voice, run until you fall, ignore until you're in pain will not bring back what is lost. I'm at the beginning of the end of insight. When the end arrives, my time will stand still. No longer will I experience the visual beauty I see you today. And that's what I wrote over 2 years ago.
Okay.
And that's how I was feeling. And a lot's changed since then,
Yeah.
much more positive, but that's just my reflection of that period.
So this came about because you were starting to have serious vision loss. Like you had to stop driving. You lost some things,
Yes.
right, that you used in. And was it? I know you retired from. Was this around the same time?
This was absolutely around the same
so
time.
you had some definite life changes, major
Right.
life changes to go through. So, would you say these 2 years have been kind of a learning curve? But you say you're more positive now. So, what are the things that you've learned in these 2 years that helps you feel like there's a way forward, there's a future, there's positive things ahead?
Wow, a lot has really changed. Well, it was 2 years ago. It was in 2015 when I actually retired.
Okay.
And the first 3 months after retirement, because the environment that I was in was always busy, I was around people, and it goes to total silence. And then you're just at home, right? So I knew about Valley Center for the Blind.
Okay.
They had helped me previously in my job for job retention with helping getting me adaptive equipment to continue the job at the time.
Okay, that's good.
So I reached back out to them. I reached back out to the Department of Rehab to get some training.
Okay.
I felt if I sit here, do nothing, I don't want to be alone and do nothing in my life. So I started training at the Valley Center of the Blind in Braille,
Okay.
in AT, which is technology,
Okay.
independent living,
Okay.
skills training, because I wanted to continue and stay as independent as I could.
So, would you say you had to make a conscious choice or decision to make your life better or what you wanted it to be, or was it just something that happened?
I made the decision.
Okay.
I made the decision because I didn't like where I was,
Okay.
where I was at in my life. It's like you self-talk and say, okay, where do we go now?
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I think some people perhaps it would be easier to be like, well, I'm blind, that's it. I can't do anything. I have very limited vision. I can't go out on my own. I can't get around. I can't,
Right.
this is all over. These are the things I can't do, so I might as well just sit here and listen to the radio or
Right.
I don't know what it is that people do. So you had to make a choice.
I had to make a choice,
like-
and the I can'ts, of course, was ringing in my ears, and it's like, no, I can, I can, and I wasn't willing to sit there and say I can't any longer. 3 months was long enough. I did my I can'ts for 3 months, and it's scary because when people lose their vision, just like any disability, I was in the environment, I am at my age, and looking at my environment, there's no blind individuals around me.
Okay.
I don't have anybody with blind or visually impaired during that time in my life.
Yeah.
So I felt alone.
Yes.
And so going and opening that door to the Valley Center for the Blind. Another organization is the California Council of the Blind and the American Council for the Blind. Since then, I have...
So just to explain briefly, there's a nationwide organization called the American Council for the Blind, and each state has its own. So we have California Council for the Blind, but there's probably an Arizona Council for the Blind, a Tennessee Council for the
Right.
Blind and in each state there are individual chapters usually throughout the state. So we have one in Fresno. So
Right.
it's, so we'll be putting up the information to contact those organizations for you to find out where your local chapter is. So anyway, please
Great.
continue.
Sure. So, all of my friends, were from work, people that I worked with,
Right.
some of the customers, and then you take that away. But once those doors opened, I got to experience living around and being involved and having some wonderful new friends that are blind or visually impaired.
Okay.
And because sometimes when life changes, especially in my experience with the vision loss, I lost friends, because they didn't, for whatever reason, they couldn't handle it, they didn't understand it. I was more limited. I couldn't just jump in the car and...
They might have felt weird about saying, Jamie, hey, let's go see a movie. Oh, wait, you're blind, but
Right.
you'd probably still like to go see a movie.
Oh,
They
I'd
have
love
audio
to see this.
description now. And,
Yes.
you know what I mean? So,
And-
but I get it that people don't know what to do. So it's easier to just kind of like fade into the background, and so that can happen.
Yeah.
But you made new friends.
I've made new friends. I've done all of my classes with the Blind Center. I partnered with the Department of Rehab, who is helping me with independence as well. So even though I retired, I have new ambitions, and they're helping me. Actually, I'm taking classes at City College.
Okay. And what's
I-
the goal for that?
To become a recreational leadership.
Okay.
And because I love the outdoors, I
Okay.
love volunteering and helping out with events,
Okay.
like kind of events that we do
And planning.
and planning. And I've done a couple of those on my own, just with the new friends that I've made, and just getting out there in the world and not staying behind doors and being able to educate and advocate for myself,
Yeah.
and which I didn't know how to do before.
Okay.
And like I mentioned, I have lost some friends, but I've probably gained tenfold,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a very exciting time for me right now.
Well, we're glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So, going back to you said you did your independent living skills. What would you say would be the hardest thing for you to relearn how to do as a blind person or a low vision person, like cooking or transportation, or like you said you were learning Braille?
Right.
What would you say?
Probably just having confidence in learning the new skills. I, at this point, can do everything that I did before in the
Okay.
kitchen, in my home, managing my money,
Okay.
doing my laundry. But at the same time, I needed to learn the skills to do that differently.
Right.
I needed technology to help me in some cases.
Okay.
Just being able to identify your nickels
Okay.
versus your quarter,
Okay.
So,
what are some of the adaptive technologies that you've gotten? And I bring this up because she has these cool glasses that I want her to talk about in a minute. But what are some of the adaptive technologies that you've been able to learn?
well, there's a software called JAWS,
Okay.
and it's a software that goes on the computer, and it speaks to you.
Okay.
It reads everything for you.
So whatever's on the screen, if you're on a Google search page
Right.
or Facebook or something, it reads to you what's on the screen.
Right, you do
Okay.
the typing, it does the talking.
Okay.
And you don't use a mouse, it's all keyboard entered.
Okay.
So definitely that's huge, and especially in today's technology.
Okay.
The simplest thing, but I was the most tickled about. It's called a liquid level indicator.
Okay.
And it's just a little thing that you put on your glass, and when you want to pour yourself a cup of coffee, glass of water, you don't spill.
Okay. We
And
have talked about that as like on our gift giving episode, and that is actually something that comes in handy, because if you're pouring a cup of coffee and it's hot, you don't want to stick your finger in there to see, oh, is it high enough? But you also
Right.
don't want to overflow your coffee cup. So this little magical thing
exactly.
will solve that problem for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is probably using a sharp knife.
Mm.
You know, at first, with low vision, you really do everything you can to use the vision that you have.
Right.
And the smartest thing is don't rely on your vision,
Okay.
because it's not what you think it is. It's
Okay.
not giving you that full vision as a sighted person would.
So you almost can't trust the little vision that you have.
Exactly.
Okay.
So part of the training that I did, especially when it came to cutting, is I would be blindfolded.
Okay.
Okay, and then that way you can really zone in on the skills of cutting, being aware of where the knife is, being aware of where your fingers are. And I actually today cut much faster,
Really?
not using my sight. I close my eyes than trying to see it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and sadly, probably the reality is that you might have to do it totally blind
Exactly.
at some point. I mean, that's the reality of your situation. It's not a happy reality, but so you've actually kind of preparing for yourself for that eventuality in a way.
Absolutely. Anything that I can do, it's the optometrist told me the best. He's like, Jamie, your vision is low, and there's certain things that come with it. You get headaches, the squinting and the straining.
Okay.
It's like don't use your sight when you don't have to. Use it for the important things.
Interesting.
So you learn those skills, learn how to use technology without sight. So
Okay.
A, you're prepared when that day does come, and B, you don't have the stressors and the headaches of that. Rather than I'd rather see my son's face right now while I have vision
Right.
versus, let's say, watching TV.
Okay.
It's kind of that. It's a decision that we need to make, or I had to make for myself.
Right.
So when I can use something else for the vision, then I do.
Okay. And it's not like saving your vision. It's just protecting yourself from the consequences. Using your vision comes with headaches.
Exactly.
And comes with eye strain. So
Shoulder aches, because you're getting
Yeah.
stressed out, things
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
So kind of live as you're totally blind until it's something you really think is important enough to get a headache over, kind of, or
Right.
that kind of thing. That's interesting, because I wouldn't have considered it from that perspective. You'd think you'd want to just see everything that you could while you could,
Right.
and that's not the way it works out. So, and now you did say that you left your magnifier at work, but I thought you said you were retired.
Well,
So,
did I not mention
what did
that?
you mean
No.
by that?
I
Yeah.
know, right?
I do know what you mean by that.
Okay.
But
Well, going back to Department of Rehab and Valley Center for the Blind, after I finished all of my training, I went ahead and started volunteering there a lot.
okay.
Because my confidence level was up. I was meeting a lot of people, and I needed that community
Okay.
at that time in my life as well. And I was meeting new friends that were part of Valley Center for the Blind and California Council of the Blind. And the more I spent time there, I was approached to see if I would like to teach and to teach what I've been taught. And I thought, well, what a great way to give back. So now I do work at Valley Center for the Blind part-time, teaching independent living skills.
Well, I think that's fantastic that you went from 2 years ago to being like, well, I don't know what to do now, to now you're teaching other people that are in your situation and making their life better and more productive, and helping people be less afraid to get out
Yes.
there and do what they're called to do, whatever that might be, advocacy or education or just living your life. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and I've met some really, really great people too,
Yeah.
and it's difficult for everybody. I mean, it's a loss.
Yes.
Your vision is a loss, and you go through the same periods of a loss. You go through the disbelief, you go through the anger, you go through the education and the acceptance. And then when you have vision loss that in respect to like RP, by the time you accept it, and then you had mentioned earlier is, how do you handle the changes?
Right.
So the changes are slow. You don't really notice them until you're also like, oh my goodness, I used to be able to do that. Now I can't. Oh my goodness, it's another loss.
Yes.
I've lost more. So then you go through that whole process, that emotional process again.
Yeah, because the reality is, and I don't know the actual statistics, we could probably Google it if we had our smartphones, but the reality is vision loss is more of a gradual process for the vast majority of people than rather a sudden. I mean, we do know people that from 1 minute to the next they lost their vision because of an accident or something like that, but the reality is most people, because of a disease like RP or diabetes or macular degeneration, are losing their sight over a longer period of time. It's not just all of a sudden.
Right.
So it's kind of, I don't know what would be harder, to go from all to nothing in the blink of an eye, literally, or, knowing that tomorrow you may lose more, and then the day after that you may lose more. Either way would be a tremendous loss, like you said. But you definitely have to have, I don't know, some coping skills and some resources.
Definitely have to have the
that.
resources and the people around you to help you get that have been or are going through the same thing. Support groups. Valley Center for the Blind, they have multiple support groups for different ages, different stages, if you will, and just communicating with the friends their experiences, because I have a lot of friends that, like you said, they did go blind overnight.
Yeah. Right.
I have friends that do have diabetic retinopathy.
Right.
And what their experience was, and then of course some that have my eye disease as well, but our experiences have been similar but different.
Yes, and so what we were talking about before is some of the best advice my husband, who lost his sight or over time, got was go be around blind people, meet them, talk to them, hang out with them, figure out what they know, because a lot of people do feel alone.
Yes.
And they don't have to.
Right. For myself, not really people, but my only experience through blindness is what was on the media, what was on TV.
Not always the greatest, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear the Ray Charles stories.
Yeah.
Helen Keller.
Yeah.
All the sighted people know who they are, but when they lose their own sight, that's their only reference.
And that's something not personal. I mean, it's not your personal reality.
Right.
All
Exactly.
right. So believe it or not, it's actually time for us to wrap things up. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was good to learn more about you and your situation. And so as we leave today, again, I want to thank you for joining us here at Blindside Fresno. And as always, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, or you need someone to talk to or to reach out or get some of these resources that we talked about, please email us at blindsidefresno.com or check us out on Facebook. We would be happy to get back to you and point you in the right direction and give you any support that you need. So thank you and have a great day, everyone.